I'm Lisa Evers, and this is Street Soldiers.
Fox 5 and Hot 97 present Street Soldiers with Lisa Evers.
More than half the states in the U.S. have legalized marijuana in some form, and big changes are being made in marijuana criminal law enforcement. But are we ready for what comes next? There are many songs about marijuana and hip-hop, but now superstar Snoop Dogg is turning his passion for pot into big business, raising $45 million for his Casa Verde investment firm.
As you build brands, as you look at the ancillary businesses, there's tremendous money to be made. And we'll only really recognize the scope of that when prohibition is actually repealed.
Marijuana's popularity is spawning many businesses, like the Emerald Farms Tour in San Francisco. With recreational use legal there, the seed-to-dispensary tours are like a wine country tour for weed lovers. In Las Vegas, they're considering pot lounges at the airport. It's full steam ahead towards legalization, says Evan Nison of NORML.
Now you have pretty much bipartisan Congress that is looking very seriously at the issue. So the momentum over the last 10 years that I've been involved has picked up much quicker than I would have even hoped.
In tandem with the legalization momentum is the drive for decriminalization, especially after studies showed that Black and Latino males were disproportionately prosecuted. But that's confusing people, says criminal defense attorney Phillip Hamilton.
Is that it has not yet been decriminalized. The conversation is ongoing. We are having a lot of reform measures that are being put out. But right now, as we speak, marijuana is still illegal in New York.
The excessive use of marijuana and the impact on public safety was on the mind of Police Commissioner O'Neill when I sat down with him recently for an exclusive interview.
As far as legalization for marijuana, I know it's coming. NYPD knows it's coming, but there are a number of things that I'm concerned about. Probably the biggest thing I'm concerned about is driving under the influence of narcotics. It's a real issue for us. There's no instantaneous test for it, like with DWI, driving under the influence of alcohol.
There are many layers to this. Let's find out what our panel has to say. Joining me is Evan Nison. He's the treasurer of NORML, also a board member. He's the president of Nison Co., and he's also the co-founder of Whoopi and Maya. Evan, great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Also joining us is Phillip Hamilton. He's a criminal defense attorney based in Manhattan, has dealt with many of these cases. Phil, great to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Also joining us is Steve Gormley. He's the CEO of International Cannabrands. He's also a pioneer in the marijuana industries and also marijuana finance markets. Thank you so much for joining us,
Thank
Steve.
you for having me, Lisa.
Really appreciate it. Phil, where do we stand in terms of the laws now of righting the wrongs of the past?
You know, I always like to start with this little tidbit, particularly here in New York City. Between the years of 2015 to 2018, we were dealing with a situation where black men, or I should just say black marijuana smokers, were being arrested at 8 times the rate of white users, right? With respect to Manhattan specifically, that rate was 15 times the rate for black arrestees as opposed to white users, right? The statistics have shown over the years that marijuana usage tends to be quite equal amongst the cultures.
Every group, right? Every
group.
demographic, every racial group.
Correct. So we had an issue clearly here in the city that, you know, Mayor de Blasio took issue with. Cyrus Vance, the district attorney from Manhattan, has taken issue with in terms of trying to right that wrong, if we do accept that premise that everyone is using marijuana at a comparable rate. To that extent, I think that as we try to get away from a lot of the discriminatory policing that centered around what we're discussing, I think getting rid of a lot of a lot of the stop and frisk has aided in that, right? I think that when I spoke about Cyrus Vance, he has taken on an initiative with respect to the Manhattan DA's office to no longer prosecute low-level marijuana offenders, right? He has taken the step of declining to prosecute those matters, and that has had a large impact, and I think moving forward will.
And we're going to talk about that and also where we stand now, because people are a little bit confused in the city about what's legal and what's not legal. But let's broaden out here and look coast to coast. Evan, where are we at in terms of full legalization everywhere? Is that 5 years off, 20 years off, around the corner?
It's hard to say, but I'd say closer to 5 years, particularly because it seems to be one of the most bipartisan issues in Congress right now, And we also now, of course, have the Democratic House, which I think will be very likely to propose it and send it to the Senate for more consideration. Trump, I mean, maybe the only thing I agree with him on is at least his stated view on cannabis policy. So things are increasing much quicker than I ever expected when I got into this as a volunteer 10 years
It's
ago.
kind of the pace is really picked up. Steve, what about the momentum in the financial world? Because when people first heard about cannabis stocks, people were like, "Oh no, you're kidding me!" But this is a big deal now.
It is a big deal. It's also a very risky endeavor. You know, when you're driving down the road and you can hear John Boehner, our former Speaker of the House, pitching informational services that come at a cost, you know there's been a seat change. The issue is that it's still a very volatile market. Now, I'm the CEO of a Canadian public company, and Canada legalized federally on October 17th last year. So it's a little less tricky to invest in stocks in that market. The SEC still operates under the pleasure of the federal branch here, and we are still viewing marijuana, as ridiculous as it sounds, as a Schedule I narcotic.
Right, and we're going to talk about that. But how have you seen the attitudes change? You know, with friends, with people you know in the finance industry.
Yes,
which
absolutely.
Tend to be very conservative?
So I would say most of the, if you go back, let's go back 36 months or so. Let's go back 3 or so 4 years. The majority of the investment into the cannabis industry came from within the industry itself. It was largely successful entrepreneurs who managed to survive the black market, thrive in the legal market, and are now looking to legitimize. They began to invest their money to scale. Then you started seeing high net worth individuals, people who had a less risk-averse investor profile.
Well, we would say who are not in the finance industry, money to burn.
Money to burn, but not just money to burn.
But like they could have, they would
someone
lose
who
their
likes
house.
the excitement or rush, like an early entrepreneur investor,
Yeah.
is not your sort of conservative billionaire type. It's somebody who's a little bit of a cowboy, somebody who's a little bit of a gunslinger, who doesn't mind taking risks, and who had
Wants that thrill.
Well, I think that there's two types of investors. There's the people that looked at the industry and recognized that this was not unlike where alcohol prohibition was, and they had a view on being like Joe Kennedy, JFK's father, who made his billions when in the years before prohibition was repealed, because he laid his groundwork both financially and otherwise, and he gained all of his wealth on the cusp of a black market industry going legitimate.
Okay, let me pick up on that point, and I want to throw this out to all of you, and guys, please feel free to jump in as you wish. This is one of the things that we've been hearing, and I've been hearing people go, well, you know what, the people who are selling weed now, you know, technically illegally, who are selling weed, they're going to be basically put out of business when when the so-called black market becomes a legal market. What do you think about that?
Shouldn't be.
I would tend to agree. I mean, look, in this respect, I think that the corporate interests are going to, bogard. If we're going to think stereotypically, the guy that's on, 241st Street or something along those lines, right? But I also think that, as we move forward, that's going to, it's just a bit unfair. Right? Like, as we think about the corporate interests being able to move in an area wherein for so long, when we talk about the discriminatory policing, you have a lot of people who are in jail right now for marijuana, right? And they weren't these, big money entrepreneurs that we think about. These were people that were just trying to make money. These were people that were just trying to support their families, and they were demonized. Wherein now that as we start to move forward with a lot of the legalization and things along those lines, there is more of a positive outlook, as you were discussing. There is more of a, let's get into this industry. It's a good thing. And I think that's a bit unfair for a lot of the people that were
involved. Evan, what about like what happened in Colorado, or what happened in other places?
I mean, it's hard to say. I think that,
or it's too soon to tell.
I think it's too soon to say. I think from an ethical standpoint, it's incredibly important to allow people that were doing something that was not unethical then and is not unethical now to continue doing it, especially for money and now that it's regulated. I think that it's vital that they that the people who are in the black market or were in the black market agree to the regulations and abide by them, but I don't think it would be ethical to block people who have minor convictions for marijuana possession or dealing
from participating in the industry.
I mean,
I couldn't agree with Evan more. I'm actually privately in the process of applying for licenses in the state of Michigan, and the hurdle to
And licenses to do, like, what are those licenses?
to manufacture, to cultivate, to sell, and to distribute marijuana. And in that market, the application process is so prohibitive. I mean, it's more invasive than...
You have to have lawyers, probably, right?
Well, it's more, a fleet of lawyers and lobbyists
legal
and
fees,
application
right.
writers.
the barrier to entry is...
Well, it's easier to go through the process of trying to adopt a child than it is securing a marijuana license, right?
You know what, let's take a break on this because we
Absolutely.
have to, we'll come back to this. I want to talk about the barriers to entry, and also as this industry unfolds. Let's pick up on that when we come back. This is Street Soldiers. I'm your host, Lisa Evers. We'll be right back.
I've been a member of the recovery community and have been sober north of a decade. And I do believe marijuana is addictive.
Let's talk about the addictive part of this, because we're in the middle right now of an opioid addiction in the United States. We have 4 people a day in New York City dying from opioid overdoses. We have nationally more people die every year from opioid overdoses than terror attacks, gun violence, car accidents, many other forms where lives are ended. And there's a concern about marijuana that if it's so readily available, there's no danger of legal repercussions once everything is fully legalized, that we will have a lot of addictive people out there. Evan, what do you say to that?
I think we'll probably have a lot of different opinions. I think, first, cannabis is very readily available right now. It's not regulated at all. It's just as easy for a 18-year-old or 21-year-old or 25-year-old currently to get it. Second of all, I'm a big fan of harm reduction. So what I like to say is, I would never say cannabis is harmless, but I would definitely say it's not harmful in the same type of way. And I would also say, based on my personal consumption experience, that if it is physically addicting, it's minor, and I'd compare it much more to my desire to go on Facebook than physical
So what
addiction.
about that? What do you think?
I mean, the thing is, like, when we listen to you, Evan, I mean, in terms of what the physiological response is, in terms of its addictiveness, is it mentally addicting, whatever it may be, we kind of have to anecdotally figure that out, because as we were discussing, the studies to be able to kind of hammer this in and figure out what is fact, what is fiction, what is how you feel as compared to like how the rest of the variables feel, we don't know, because we haven't been able to test it
Because they can't do these tests. And what about
You make a very good point, and testing is critical. But I'll share. I've been a member of the recovery community and have been sober north of a decade, and I do believe marijuana is addictive, and I do believe that people who suffer from addiction should not choose cannabis products unless they're medically prescribed by a doctor. Likewise, I also believe there's reams of data that show there is a profound intellectual impact on people under the age of 23 who consume marijuana products.
And there was a study not done here in the United States that said it affects your brain chemistry for people under.
But that doesn't mean it should be
21.
illegal. Is it a gateway drug?
Is it a gateway drug? That's what
your cell phone's a gateway. Cigarettes are a gateway. Alcohol is certainly a gateway. Anything that you can do compulsively and addictively.
Okay, but you say, and Evan, you guys are saying, okay, but it's always marijuana is out there, but it's like food. It's a different thing between if you have to order something, have it delivered, or go to the store to buy it, and it's like right there put in front of you.
We know the foods that can kill you. We know the rate by which alcohol is involved in a lot of deaths, right? Be it from drunk driving, be it from cirrhosis of the liver, what have you. We know these things. It doesn't mean that now all of a sudden you have to, make salt illegal, right? Or that we go back to prohibition with respect to alcohol. The bigger point that we're trying to have
here, regulated.
Exactly. It can be regulated, but it doesn't have to be illegal.
But what about the quality? What about the quality and the potency? Alcohol, they'll be like beer, whatever percentage alcohol.
Well, that's part of
wine,
regulation.
That's
alcohol.
part of, right now in California, there was a massive change over the summer, right? And so when you actually package a marijuana product and sell it at retail in a dispensary, you are now required to list its THC content. And like having, requiring what grade of proof a particular bottle of alcohol is, absolutely you should be doing that. I want to make it clear that while I do believe that marijuana can be addictive for people who suffer from addiction, most people don't suffer from addiction.
Evan, give us a picture, kind of like a big picture of the types of businesses that are out there. I mean, we've seen Snoop Dogg with his businesses. We've seen Wiz Khalifa, other hip-hop artists. Some of the female country music stars have gotten involved in it. What kinds of things are happening?
Well, like Steve was saying, during the break, this is the sort of golden era for brands right now. Brands are the one thing that we're for sure, or I am sure, will outlive any regulation change or any law change or anything like that. And everybody is sort of racing to get their niche and their target demographic. And that could range, on the product side, like Steve was saying before, edibles, topicals, pre-rolls, vape pens, and then you can get within that, obviously edibles can go into anything. And then even within that, you're talking different strains, sativa, indica, whatever. And then businesses, you're talking about ancillary marketing companies, PR firms, law firms,
technology companies.
Everyone.
Look, you have to grow it, right? The lights that you need in your hydroponic shop. There's so many different business niches.
Accountants,
a facility in New Jersey where they're making actual herbs for cooking, but ready to turn over. It's like a $3 million hydroponic.
I know I've referred to the pre-prohibition before in this interview, and like when you think of like Absolute, Hennessy, Coors, Heineken, all of these different alcohol brands that are household names.
Right. In
the years leading up to the repeal of prohibition and the years afterward, you didn't see that. Right now, no marijuana brand controls more than 4% of its state market. What that means is that there's this tremendous opportunity in brands.
Because there's no one dominating.
My company, International Cannabrands, is rolling up. We're going after middle market brands. We don't want to bag elephants. We want profitable businesses run by young, hungry entrepreneurs. Imagine like rolling up a regional, like InBev, rolling up regional beers, right? Craft beers that do really well in their local markets. That's what we're doing, except focused on marijuana brands.
And doing it that way. Phil, what about the branding thing we've seen with illegal drugs? I mean, I've seen heroin packets and fentanyl packets stamped with the brands.
Right.
But what about the effect on street dealers or people who are dealing on that level?
Great question, Lisa. I think at the end of the day, what's going to happen with respect to all the legalization is that it's going to just depress the market. I don't think the street dealers are going away, right? So when you talk about what are the street brands that you typically hear or that I used to see with clients when I was at the Bronx Defenders, the Kush, the Reg, the Perp, whatever it may be, they will still be around. I think that what's going to happen, though, is that their price point is just going to take a hit depending upon regulation and taxes of the legal market, right? So depending on, say for an instance, with respect to the legal market, you tax an ounce at $50 an ounce, no matter what the price of the ounce may be, right?
Right.
To that extent, when you're, maybe like a college kid or, somebody that's like strapped on cash that otherwise wants to smoke your marijuana, if you can't afford it at these, legalized businesses, the street guy will be able to come in and figure out what that price point will be to stay competitive even within the legal market.
Thank you guys for being with us for this episode of Street Soldiers. Evan Nison, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Phil Hamilton, great to have you.
Thank you.
Steve Gormley, great to have you on the show.
Thank you,
Thank
Lisa.
you so
Thanks
much
for having us.
And thank you for joining me for this episode of Street Soldiers. I'm Lisa Evers. Remember, use your mind. It's your best weapon. I hope it's your only weapon. Let's push for peace.